Hello Zenith women and welcome to the channel. The world breaks everyone and afterward some are strong at the broken places. Ernest Hemingway. But here's the catch. Some don't just become strong, they become untouchable, emotionally untouchable. And that's exactly what happens to Sigma females. Fact. Studies show that emotionally intelligent people often withdraw when they realize their energy isn't being reciprocated. Now take that fact and apply it to a woman who already thrives in solitude, sees through people like an X-ray machine and has zero tolerance for nonsense. What happens? She doesn't just withdraw, she evolves into something colder, sharper and far less forgiving, but don't get it twisted. Sigma females don't start out cold-hearted, they become that way, not because they're bitter, but because life has given them no other choice. The process is slow, subtle and devastatingly effective. And by the time people realize what's happening, the warm, emotionally available woman they once knew is long gone, replaced by someone who only gives her emotions to those who have earned them. So how does this transformation happen? How does a woman who once cared deeply turn into someone who watches the world with calculated detachment? Buckle up, because this isn't just psychology, it's a reality check. Number 1, surrounded by fakes drained by users. Sigma. Females don't start off cold, they start off curious. They observe people, try to understand them, and at some point genuinely believe in human connection. But after years of seeing the same pattern play out, something in them shifts. They realize that most people don't approach them for who they are, but for what they can offer. And that's where the slow detachment begins. It starts with small things. A so-called friend who only calls when they need advice. A colleague who suddenly acts friendly when they need a favor. A family member who praises their independence but never actually shows up when they need support. At first they brush it off. They tell themselves it's just bad luck, that maybe they're overthinking it, but then it keeps happening. Again, and again and again, until they see the pattern so clearly it's impossible to ignore. Every interaction becomes a test. Is this person genuinely interested in them, or are they just looking for access? Sigma females don't just give away their energy freely anymore, they measure it out carefully, calculating who actually deserves it. And when they realize that most people fail this test, that's when the emotional doors start shutting, one by one. They stop over-explaining, they stop responding to messages that drain them, they stop being available just because someone expects them to be. The warmth that once made them approachable turns into something else, selective, distant, controlled. And it confuses people. Suddenly, the same individuals who took their kindness for granted start wondering why they seem so distant, why they don't engage like they used to. But it's not a mystery, it's a decision. Sigma females aren't cold-hearted because they want to be. They become this way because they have to be. After years of watching people treat them like a resource instead of a person, they learn the hard way that emotional generosity is a luxury, not a necessity. And in a world full of takers, the only way to survive is to stop giving to those who never deserved it in the first place. Number 2, betrayal is a teacher, not a wound. Betrayal doesn't just hurt Sigma females, it educates them. Most people feel the sting, grieve, and eventually move on, hoping for better outcomes with new people. Sigma females don't have that luxury. They don't just feel betrayal, they study it. They break it down like a crime scene investigator, tracing every red flag they ignored, every instinct they second-guessed, every excuse they made for the person who ultimately proved them right. And once they see the pattern, they never unsee it. They learn that betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper, a shift in energy, a slight hesitation before answering a question. They become hyper-aware of inconsistencies, the subtle cracks in a person's mask. One moment of deception doesn't just disappoint them, it confirms everything they've been preparing for. And when that happens, there's no argument, no dramatic confrontation. They simply shut down. They withdraw their trust like a bank freezing an account after fraud detection. And just like that, the relationship is over, whether the other person realizes it yet or not. This is why they trust sparingly. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. When they finally let someone in, they've already calculated the risk, examined the variables, and weighed the potential damage. They're not naive enough to believe in blind loyalty anymore. They know that trust is earned, not owed. And if someone betrays them, that's it. No second chances, no bargaining, no prolonged suffering. just a cold, decisive exit. People often mistake this for being cold-hearted, but it's really just a defense mechanism. When you've been burned enough times, you stop reaching for the fire. Sigma females don't hold grudges. They hold lessons. They don't dwell on betrayal. They adapt to it. And in a world where deception is common, they make sure it never catches them off guard again. Number 3, growing tired of leading the blind. Sigma females don't just see through illusions, they used to try helping others see them too. They once believed that if they pointed out the traps, the toxic cycles, the self-sabotaging behaviors, people would wake up and change. They invested time, energy, and sometimes even their emotions into guiding others toward a better path. But after years of doing this, they finally understand a brutal truth. Most people don't want to be saved. They want to feel like they're trying while staying exactly where they are. At first, it's frustrating. They pour wisdom into people who nod in agreement but go right back to their old ways the moment comfort calls. They watch the same individuals complain about the same problems, make the same mistakes, and repeat the same cycles despite all the warnings. And after enough of this, something inside them shifts. They no longer have the patience for willful ignorance. They realize that trying to enlighten those who choose blindness is like shouting into a void, so they step back, not out of bitterness, but out of exhaustion. They stop offering advice that falls on deaf ears. They stop trying to rescue people from problems they secretly enjoy. They stop being the emotional crutch for those who refuse to stand on their own. And instead of frustration, they feel something unexpected, relief. Because the moment they stop trying to wake others up, they free themselves from the burden of dragging dead weight. This is when people start calling them cold, distant, or unbothered. But what they don't realize is that Sigma females never stop caring. They just stop wasting their care. They still value wisdom, growth, and deep conversations, but only with those who actually want to evolve. If someone prefers illusions over truth, that's their choice. But Sigma females, they're done leading the blind. Number 4, becoming the thing they once feared. Sigma females weren't always this way. There was a time when they were warm, open, and willing to believe in the goodness of people. They gave without hesitation, trusted without constant evaluation, and let others into their world without a second thought. But life had other plans. It didn't just teach them lessons. It trained them, sharpening their instincts until they could no longer ignore what was right in front of them. At first, they resisted. They didn't want to become guarded. They didn't want to be the person who questioned every intention, who second-guessed every promise, who saw potential betrayal in even the smallest inconsistencies. That wasn't who they were, or so they thought. But reality doesn't care about who you want to be. It forces you to adapt, or it breaks you. And when Sigma females realized that their openness was being used against them, when they saw how people took advantage of their trust, they made a choice. Not a loud, dramatic one, but a quiet, permanent shift. They became selective, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. They became emotionally detached, not because they lacked feelings, but because they learned that most people don't deserve access to them. And the strangest part, they once feared becoming this way. They thought closing off meant losing themselves, but now, standing on the other side of that transformation, they wouldn't have it any other way, because now they don't waste energy on the wrong people. Now they don't suffer unnecessary betrayals. Now they see the world exactly as it is, not as they wish it to be. And while others may call them distant or unapproachable, they know the truth. This isn't weakness. This isn't bitterness. This is what survival looks like when you've learned the hard way that kindness without boundaries is just an invitation for exploitation. Number 5, realizing most people want access, not connection. Sigma females don't crave surface-level interactions. They value depth, authenticity, and real human connection. But over time, they realize a brutal truth. Most people don't want them. They want what they offer. Their energy, their insights, their problem-solving skills, their ability to remain calm under pressure. People latch onto these things like leeches, mistaking generosity for obligation. And once a Sigma female sees this pattern for what it is, the emotional doors slam shut. It starts with small moments, someone who only reaches out when they need advice, a friend who disappears when there's nothing to gain, a partner who loves the stability she provides but never actually sees her. At first, she gives people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe it's not as one-sided as it feels. But the more it happens, the more undeniable the truth becomes. She's being treated like a resource, not a person. That's when the detachment begins. Not out of anger, not out of pettiness, but out of self-respect. Sigma females refuse to be anyone's emotional vending machine. They won't stick around just to be drained dry by people who only show up when they need something, so they start cutting ties, often without warning, without explanation. Because once they recognize that someone values their utility more than their humanity, there's nothing left to discuss. And this is where people get confused. They wonder why she suddenly became distant, why she stopped responding, why she no longer seems as available. The truth is, she's still the same person, thoughtful, intuitive, loyal to the right ones. But she's done giving her energy to those who never saw her as anything more than a convenience. So if someone suddenly finds themselves on the outside looking in, chances are they never really cared about her in the first place. They only cared about what she could do for them. And once a Sigma female figures that out, there's no coming back. Number 6, losing faith in emotional reciprocity. Sigma. Females don't start off emotionally closed. They start off giving. They listen. They support. They show up when it matters, believing deep down that people will do the same for them. But time proves them wrong. They realize again and again that most people are comfortable taking but hesitant to give. Their kindness is met with convenience, their emotional presence treated as a default setting rather than something valuable, and that's when something inside them starts to shift. Doesn't happen overnight. At first they convince themselves it's just bad luck, that maybe they've been choosing the wrong people. So they keep trying, they keep investing, but the more they give without receiving, the more they start to question if emotional reciprocity even exists the way they once believed. They notice how people are eager to unload their burdens, but disappear when the Sigma female needs support. They see how their ability to listen is praised, yet no one bothers to truly understand them. And when they do express their own struggles, they're often met with indifference, dismissal, or even discomfort. Because people are so used to them being the strong one that they don't know how to handle their vulnerability. At some point, they stop expecting anything in return. They stop hoping that the emotional energy they put out will ever be matched. And once expectations die, so does warmth. Not in a bitter, resentful way, just in a quiet, calculated shift. They no longer give freely. They no longer extend themselves for people who wouldn't do the same. They become selective, cautious, and to those who once benefited from their emotional generosity, they suddenly seem distant, detached, even cold. But this isn't about being heartless. It's about self-preservation. Sigma females aren't interested in one-sided connections. They won't waste emotions on people who treat them as emotional anchors while never offering them a place to rest. So if they seem unbothered, if they no longer engage the way they used to, it's not because they don't care. It's because they've finally accepted reality. Most people will never match their depth, and they refuse to drown themselves trying to change that. Number 7, compassion turned into a liability. Sigma. Females don't stop being kind. They stop leading with kindness. There's a difference. They've learned the hard way that when you give too much, too freely, without discernment, people mistake it for a bottomless well they can keep drawing from. At first, they believe that being compassionate is a strength, that their ability to understand and support others will be valued. But reality hits hard. The more they give, the more people expect. And the moment they set boundaries, the same people who once praised their generosity turn cold. It's a brutal wake-up call. They start to see the pattern, how their kindness attracts those who want comfort, not connection. How people are drawn to them not because of who they are, but because of what they offer. And the worst part, the more they give, the less they are respected. Suddenly, their empathy isn't seen as a rare quality, it's seen as a resource to be used until depleted. That's when the recalibration happens. They stop offering warmth as a default setting. They stop extending compassion to those who haven't earned it. It's not that they stop caring, they still care deeply, but they express it in ways that don't leave them exposed. Instead of being the emotional caretaker for everyone around them,
They channel their energy into people who have proven their loyalty. Instead of offering help automatically, they observe first, assessing whether someone genuinely deserves it. This shift confuses people. Those who once benefited from their open-hearted nature start to complain that they've changed, that they've become distant, guarded, even unfeeling. But what these people fail to realize is that Sigma females haven't lost their compassion. They've just learned to protect it. They no longer hand it out like free samples. And if that makes them seem cold to those who were only there for the benefits, so be it. Because for Sigma females, kindness is no longer a weakness. It's a privilege that not everyone gets to access.
And number 8, seeing the pattern, people love you until you say no. Sigma. Females have watched this pattern play out so many times that it no longer surprises them. It just confirms what they already know. At first, people admire them. They're drawn to their independence, their wisdom, their ability to handle life without constantly seeking validation. They become the go-to person for advice, support, and stability. But the admiration is conditional. It lasts only as long as the Sigma female is convenient. The moment she asserts herself, the moment she dares to say no, everything shifts. Suddenly, the same people who once praised her strength now call her difficult. The ones who appreciated her independence now accuse her of being too distant. The respect she once received turns into resentment, all because she refused to be available on demand. Sigma females don't operate on other people's expectations. They don't exist to be anyone's emotional crutch, personal therapist, or endless supply of energy. And when people realize they can't control her, they lash out. They say she's changed, that she's not as nice as she used to be. But the truth is, she was never nice. She was fair. She gave as much as she received. And when it became clear that the dynamic was one-sided, she adjusted accordingly. At some point, Sigma females stopped trying to be liked. They see how quickly admiration turns to bitterness when they no longer play the role people expect. They stop bending over backward for people who only love them when it's easy. Instead, they focus on what serves them, their goals, their peace, their well-being. They choose depth over popularity, quality over quantity, and if that means fewer people around, so be it. Because they'd rather stand alone with their dignity intact than be surrounded by people who only value them when they're saying yes. Number 9, emotionally starving in a world of superficiality. Sigma females don't just want depth, they need it, but the world around them is drowning in the opposite. Conversations rarely go beyond surface-level pleasantries. Friendships often feel more like performances where people play their roles but never truly connect. Social media turns into a parade of curated lives where authenticity is sacrificed for validation. And after years of trying to navigate this superficial landscape, Sigma females stop fighting it. They stop expecting anything different. They retreat, not out of bitterness but out of sheer exhaustion. They've spent too much time hoping to find genuine connections, only to be met with people who mistake deep conversations for too much and vulnerability for weakness. They see how easily people lie to themselves, how comfort takes precedence over truth, and how most interactions are just transactional. The realization is draining. They're not interested in playing along, pretending to care about meaningless chatter, or investing in relationships that never go beyond convenience. They're wired for depth, but they live in a world that rewards shallowness, so they detach. Not in a loud, dramatic way. There's no announcement, no bitterness, no need to prove a point. They just disengage. They choose solitude over forced interactions, authenticity over popularity. They become selective about who gets their energy because they refuse to waste it on relationships that lack substance. And to outsiders, it might seem like they've grown cold, like they no longer care. But the truth is they care too much. They care so much that they'd rather be alone than settle for a world that refuses to meet them at their level. Number 10, the loneliness that becomes a badge of honor. Loneliness isn't something Sigma females choose, it's something they earn. At first it feels like a punishment. They watch as others effortlessly blend into social circles, maintain surface-level friendships, and tolerate mediocrity just to avoid being alone. Meanwhile, they stand apart, craving something deeper, something real. And for a while it hurts. They wonder if maybe they're the problem, if maybe they should lower their standards, play the game, fake the smiles, and pretend like the emptiness doesn't bother them. But then something shifts. The loneliness stops feeling like a curse and starts feeling like clarity. It becomes a testament to the fact that they refused to settle for less than they deserved. Every shallow conversation they walked away from, every forced connection they refused to entertain, every toxic relationship they cut off, it all led to this solitude. And instead of feeling ashamed of it, they start wearing it like armor. They may be alone, but they are never desperate. They don't chase validation. They don't beg for company, and they certainly don't trade their peace for temporary companionship. They've seen what happens when people fear loneliness. It makes them cling to the wrong people, tolerate disrespect, and betray themselves just to avoid an empty room. Sigma females would rather face solitude head-on than lose themselves in the crowd. Over time, the loneliness transforms. It stops being something they suffer through and becomes something they own. It becomes proof of their strength, their standards, and their unwillingness to compromise. It's no longer about not having people, it's about choosing to wait for the right ones, and if that means standing alone for as long as it takes, so be it. Because for Sigma females, loneliness isn't a weakness, it's the price of self-respect, and they'll pay it gladly. Sigma females don't become cold-hearted by choice. It happens over time, shaped by hard lessons, broken trust, and a world that fails to meet them at their level. They start off open, hopeful, willing to give, willing to believe. But when patterns repeat, when betrayal outweighs loyalty, when depth becomes a burden instead of a gift, they adapt. Their warmth becomes selective, their kindness guarded, their trust earned, not given. People call them distant, detached, even ruthless. But what they don't see is the price Sigma females paid to become this way. They don't see the disappointments that hardened them, the heartbreaks that made them cautious, or the exhaustion that forced them to retreat. They don't understand that this coldness isn't cruelty, it's survival, it's a refusal to be drained, used, or manipulated. Yet beneath it all, the fire still burns. Sigma females may be guarded, but they are not empty. They still feel deeply, love fiercely, and care intensely, but only for those who prove themselves worthy. They haven't lost their warmth. They've just learned that not everyone deserves access to it. And if that makes them seem cold, so be it. Because at the end of the day, they would rather be misunderstood than mistreated. They would rather stand alone in their truth than be surrounded by people who only love them when it's convenient. And that right there is the ultimate power. If this hit home for you, don't just scroll away. Be part of the conversation. Drop a comment below, share your thoughts, and let me know which point resonated with you the most. And if you're the kind of person who values depth, truth, and unapologetic honesty, then this is just the beginning. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on content that speaks to who you truly are. Like the video if you found it powerful, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Let's build a community of people who don't just exist, they thrive on their own terms. Stay strong, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one.